Hello, I'd like to start this video with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge that we are making this video today on Biripi land. I'd like to acknowledge Biripi people, elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge Aboriginal people, all Aboriginal people who might be watching this video today, the lands from which you come from, and your elders, past, present and emerging. My name's Isabel Tombleson and I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been asked to make this video today to answer some questions for John Maloof, who is a lecturer at University of New England, for his students, talking about my experience providing services to Aboriginal people. John's first question asks, what formal training have I had in working with Aboriginal people? I've only had a couple of sessions of formal training provided to me through my workplaces over the last few years. Most of those training sessions have been mandatory, and some of them have been quite comprehensive, supporting my learning about Aboriginal people and Aboriginal culture, some of which have also aimed to try and help me in my work as a clinician, but I would say I've learned a lot more myself through talking with Aboriginal people in my workplace and in my community. John asks, how many Aboriginal clients have I had? And I had to think for a little bit about this question because immediately I thought maybe between 20 and 50, but then when I reflected on the experience that I have working in Western Sydney as well as working in the Mid-North Coast, I've probably had upwards of 50. What I've learned from working with Aboriginal clients, I have learned that it's really important to be flexible and adaptive in providing therapy for Aboriginal people. Not every Aboriginal person is going to want us to provide therapy in the same way. So if we've had an experience with an Aboriginal person where they've let us know that we were effective with them, don't expect to be able to repeat that method again with every Aboriginal person that you are referred. Each Aboriginal person will identify differently with their culture, and so it's important when you first meet an Aboriginal client that you take time to talk with them in the initial session about how might they prefer us to work with them. Do they have any preferences? But we must keep in mind that Aboriginal people may not feel comfortable to speak up in those initial sessions, may be more likely to be passive and agreeable with us and go along with however we decide to do therapy. So always keep that in mind and focus on building up a good therapeutic alliance or rapport with your Aboriginal client, and allow your intuition around body language and reading your client's cues to guide you in how you might adapt your therapeutic approach. I highly recommend, though, keeping in mind taking your therapy sessions outside of the clinical space, the typical clinical space. So offering to your client to go outside for a walk or find a nice patch of grass under a shady tree if it's a nice day, and conducting your session in that way. You might also be able to offer to conduct your sessions in a communal space in the community outside of your clinical setting. Allow your judgment to guide you on what you think might work best with that client. As I said, every Aboriginal client will prefer different things, so you want to take your time, not make assumptions, and be ready to be flexible and adaptive. The final question is if I have any suggestions, tips or comments for students. So my best suggestion is to find ways for you to learn and grow your knowledge of working with Aboriginal people outside of the mandatory training that you might be provided, and outside of talking with Aboriginal people in your workplace or your community. Find related videos, articles online, watch informative documentary movies or other films that talk about Aboriginal history and Aboriginal life. Read some good books. I have a particular book that I was recommended. The book is called Fragility, and that was a very helpful book in helping me to understand the experience Aboriginal people have in our community and the power difference that they experience on a day-to-day basis. It breaks down the power, I guess, and privilege that white people do experience on a daily basis, and helps to flip any biases or unrealistic views that we might have about how that impacts Aboriginal people. So White Fragility, I highly recommend Googling it, and you'll be able to find it and grab a copy for a relatively small price. So that is what I recommend. Go beyond what you're provided in your workplace or in your university course. Have a look at some films, have a look at some books, do your own reading, see how that can help to inform you in your practice. Also, if you do have access to Aboriginal co-workers, which you may do if you're working regionally especially, try not to take advantage or expect them to provide you with knowledge and information. But if you do want to ask them a question, I've got an Aboriginal client, and I'd love, to get some guidance from you if you're willing to share it. I did find that really valuable and helped me a lot along the way, especially in the early days when I was still fresh out of my master's program. I really wanted to make sure that I did my best working with Aboriginal people in my community, and I didn't have access to a lot of resources back then, or I hadn't learned how to find them yet. So I had some very lovely Aboriginal liaison officers in the local community centres near where I worked, and they were more than willing to support me in kicking off my cultural learning Aboriginal experience, working with Aboriginal people and experience. I hope this video is helpful for you. Thanks for listening, and all the best with your studies.